Okay, so hello, I'm going to start doing a little series of game development videos of just stuff I'm working through at home. Um, Basically, I was working on a project for about the last year, and I'll just have a little demo of that. But the code base I'm using is pretty old now. This isn't the right thing. Oops. The code base is pretty old, and I've been kind of putting off refactoring it. The code I'm using kind of built up over about the last 10 years or something, so I want to sort of start again. And I've been working in the games industry for the last 6 years, so I got a lot of experience about game engine development, and I thought it'd be nice to just work through a project and try and make the code really nice. And the overall aim is to develop a lightweight game engine, an editor kind of tool, and a game. And the focus is going to be on kind of writing optimal code and trying to get maximum throughput, so I can have a game which has thousands and thousands of entities and collisions and particles and all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to try and write really optimal code and subsystems, and I thought it'd be nice to sort of share my process and work through it. I think there'd be some interesting stuff maybe for like intermediate programmers. I'm not going to sort of talk about the basics of programming, but I'm going to talk through why I'm doing certain things, and hopefully some other people will find it interesting. So I got this really hacked in bits of code hacked into the same engine, so I want to make a separate engine and game project where I can create multiple games. So if I feel like it on the spur of a moment, I can just get a main loop, start a new project, use my engine code base in a nice clean interface, and just start coding. At the moment I've been like hacking in different projects and ideas into the same code base, so it's just become a bit messy, and I thought sharing my process of going through rewriting all this stuff, there'd be a lot of useful information. I've moved over to Visual Studio 2013 for the new project, so this is just the old project in Visual Studio 2008. I'm just going to plug in a control pad. Okay, so I've got this like little spaceship, you can't really see very clearly, with some ambient light. There's a light pre-pass render in here, so all these lights, dynamic lights, and it's also, well, this is a bit of a bad example. I've got some voids here which chase me around. This polygon shouldn't be there, because this is a randomly generated level, and there's still some problems in the algorithm which generates it. I can go in like a edit mode to view this. So some of the polygon there is actually been generated incorrect, but I'll go into the next one. Okay, here's a better example. So I wrote this algorithm which generates these corridors and populates some voids in there, and the spaceship can fly around. The algorithm starts like in a 2D space and places down corridors and then triangulates it and turns it into polygons. It's taken me quite a while to actually get that working, and I basically did it because I wanted to generate some random content, but I didn't want to use voxels or, you know, the sort of typical tile-based things. I wanted to just sort of start from scratch and see what I came up with. So I came up with this algorithm which generates these sort of levels, and in the future I'll go through in more detail how the algorithm actually works. I've got some voids here, they're still a bit noisy and not sort of behaving correctly. I'm going to use this kind of as a template of code that I'm going to use in the new project, but I'm going to basically rewrite it. So I'll use probably the level generation stuff. The frame rate's a bit laggier here. I think it's because I'm streaming on YouTube and recording audio and screen capture. So yeah, that's maybe a bit of a problem. Okay, so I got a little diagram here of what I'm going to be doing. So here I've got I called it pen for polymonster engine. Polymonster is just a silly little name I gave to myself when I was at uni for my code projects and stuff. So polymonster engine, and that's going to be, I'm going to write that primarily in C, and this is going to abstract the graphics API. For the course of this project, I'm going to use D3D11, D3D11 but with D3D10 feature set or feature level on, because I don't have a D3D11 capable GPU. I'm going to call this one PED for polymonster editor, and that's going to be written in C#.net. There's going to be this polymonster communication layer, which is going to use C++ common language interface, and then I'm going to write game projects in C and C++, and they can use the editor and also the engine as well. So this is kind of, yeah, the little ecosystem I'm going to create, and in theory I'll be able to create a game project very easily, and then I can just use my engine and editor code base, and I might add another one in of like a toolkit kind of thing with maths and common functionality. But you know, sometimes people build those into an engine. I want to kind of keep the engine really lean and lightweight, and just an abstraction layer which makes porting easier. So yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start by basically creating these projects and having them interact with one another. They won't be doing all that much, but one problem with the previous project that I just showed you is that the layout of the project files, where the binaries get built and where the source files and libs are, it's all a bit of a mess. It's all over the place because the code base has been developed over such a long time. My coding style has changed, my preferences have changed, and I want to sort of tie that all down. So I'm going to generate the projects so I can check out on any machine, and it will build and it will work. For example, at the moment in this old Visual Studio project, I've got hard-coded paths and stuff like that. It's just not the best way to do things. So to do this and to make it nice, I am going to use premake, and I already did a quick test one here using premake 5 and like a little skeleton structure. So what I'm going to do is create this skeleton structure for the engine and the game and the editor, and then I'm going to have them interact. So I'm also going to use SVN, so I'm going to have an SVN repository. So I'm using assembler to store my SVN repository. I'm going to create a new repository, and I'm going to basically just show you through everything that I'm doing, so I'll talk through as I do it. So yeah, the first thing I need to do is create a subversion repository. I'm going to call it pen for polymonster engine, like I said before. Go to my repository. Okay, so I want to create a directory structure. Project 1 was just a quick test. A new folder called pen, and maybe I'll do a subdirectory actually. I'm just gonna call this dev because I've got some other files and stuff in this folder, and then from here I will create a space for this polymonster engine, and then do an svn checkout of pen. It should be in my repository, it should be there. Okay, so it should be this pen trunk. The reason I called it pen is because I'm going to just use that as the namespace, and I was trying to think of something that's really short and just easy to type as a prefix when I'm using the engine code from inside the game or whatever. So svn is pen in lowercase. So I want pen and trunk. Okay. There's actually nothing there. That's created the repository in here. Okay, so in order to try and eliminate the problems I had in the past of projects that were hard to move between machines or share or collaborate with other people because of the location of libs and things it included, and include files and stuff like, and source files and the locations of them, and it all became a bit messy. So I'm going to use premake, which will also allow me to easily port between different IDEs. If I wanted to do a Mac version, it can generate Xcode project files from, you can kind of copy and paste the same settings or whatever. It's nicer to work in a Lua script than the little individual settings for each individual IDE. So in here I'm gonna just create some empty folders which are going to be the location of files that I'm going to use. So I'm going to have an include a source lib. I don't know if I'll need lib, and bin, and also assets. Now in the engine, don't really want to be using assets, but maybe sometimes you might want to have a shader or textures or something available in the engine potentially. Maybe you could expose an interface to supply like default textures or something from a game to the engine, but I'm just going to sort of flesh out this little directory structure, and then I'll check in the whole thing. One thing that's annoying me is that I know it's working. Okay, the little tortoise SVN icons weren't working the other day, which is useful sometimes to know if you've got local changes or not, or if things are unversioned. Particularly, that's what's best for me to spot. I usually use the check modifications dialog box for when I check stuff into SVN. So I don't really mind about knowing which files have changed, but having these little icons helps you notice if you haven't included a file or a folder to the or you haven't committed it or added it to the repository if it's new. So yeah, they're empty files, and in the previous one I already had these premake files. If these will be versioned in the other repository, but I think if I copy them just like this it should be okay. Right, okay, so I'm using premake 5 at the moment because I'm using Visual Studio 2013, and that I needed a beta or newer version of premake to support 2013. I created this make project script which just basically calls premake 5 and it says VS 2013. If I wanted to build for multiple platforms I could put in premake 5 and put in my favoured platforms. This is the actual premake exe itself. I'm just going to add that into the repository as well, just so I can check it out from other machines and not have to worry about this. I have premake 4 in my system path already, but I'm just going to leave premake 5 in here. And then this is the premake Lua script, which basically builds I called the last one project 1. I'm going to call this one pen, and the solution in the project is going to be pen polymonster engine. So in premake you just basically specify through this scripting language solution and properties, and it's much nicer. You can see more of the properties in one go. For once, you can search the file for the text for the properties you're looking for, and I've spent loads of time when porting projects messing around in that IDE specific property pages, trying to find out why I've got some mysterious cryptic linker error, and I think using premake simplifies that process. It also massively helps with including CPP files into the project, because you can just specify wildcards, and that makes it loads easier than creating the file structure on your PC and then also mimicking that file structure from in the Solution Explorer in Visual Studio. That was one thing I always had a massive problem with, and I think that's really premake is great for solving that issue. So this is just going to create a windowed app because I'm going to be starting with D3D and Win32, and you need a Win32 app to create a window so you can render a D3D device into there. Here you specify your configurations. I'm going to just stick with release and debug for the time being because that's all I need. Eventually I'll do like a final distribution build and maybe profile builds and stuff like that. Certainly having premake makes managing configurations much easier because you can kind of share the functionality from various configurations more easily, I think, than doing it in the Visual Studio settings. So yeah, when I do this, I'll save this and just run the make projects batch, so it just calls premake 5. I just put a pause in so I can see the output. That's why it's in a batch file really. So it has generated the build and Win32 folder to keep it organized, because eventually it might have build, Xcode or build and I don't know, different platforms. The intention is maybe hopefully to make this portable so I could do console development and stuff like that. and then it's created the solution files and VCX projects. So this is a new folder, Win32, and there's my solution files. Just open up the solution and check that it's worked. I originally had some problems with this when I first did it, because I was naming the directory structure in the solution name, and that's not how you do it. So you have solution, that's the name, not the location and name, and then there's a location parameter. I haven't looked at all the documentation yet on premake, but as and when I need to add features, I'll add them in and talk through it, I guess. So here's pen, and oops. And there's nothing in there basically, just completely empty. So I'm going to add a file in there to get started, and I'm going to just use the D3D11 sample tutorial 1, which basically creates a window, and it also creates a D3D device and just clears the screen, because I'm going to use that as reference. I prefer using just code as reference, really. I can read the code and find out all the information I want from it, and there's no point just typing it all completely from scratch, because I need a win main and I need to initialize all these D3D structs and stuff like that. So it's just like a template for me to fill out and modify and format in my own desired way. So I did have some problems with doing this. I actually have a better modified version of this file, tutorial 01. Tutorial 01 from the Visual Studio or the Microsoft website. Their solution has a resource file and a header. I think in the resource file it redefines the win main, so it takes a wide string. So when I compiled, I didn't want to include the resource file because I didn't really know how to do it yet, and I didn't know how I want to handle that and hook it all up. So when I tried to build, it said I had build errors when things were casting string literals to wide string literals with the L prefix. And I had to make that change, and then also create win main had LPC WSTR instead of just a normal string. So that was a little bit fiddly, but I've done it now. I'll paste it in. So one thing about adding source when you use premake, because it parses this, I can just add the file in there into this directory, and it will build, it will add into the built solution. So this has been changed from outside the environment. If I reload, hopefully it'll work. Sometimes that can be a bit buggy and crash basically, but it didn't then. So yeah, so basically straight from the Microsoft tutorial is this code, and if I run it, it should work. Oh no, actually it won't work. I need to link the D3D libs, and I'm going to do that inside premake. So I've got unresolved external D3D11 create device, no problem. Just need to include the libs. So I'll do that now, and I don't know how to do it, so I might have to use the reference. Defines, I think it's called links. debug for the moment. I'm gonna look at the Microsoft example D3D tutorial solution. I'm gonna fire this up and see which D3D libs they've actually linked in, just so I know the correct ones. See, like all this is basically premake's doing this, and it's all crammed in, and you know, it's all sub menus and stuff like that. It's just quite annoying. So in additional library dependencies, okay, I think the premake by default throws in a load of additional dependencies for you, and I'm hoping that if I specify these, that it won't put in all these libs that I don't actually need. So d3d11.lib, obviously need that. D3D compiler, I assume is the shader compiler. D3D yes, shader compiler. devlog0x00. I'm not sure what that is. I'm gonna find out what all these libs are. A nice thing about doing this is just typing through and looking through everything that's going into a project. It's nice to be lean and not have lots of superfluous libs and headers and things like that. What is this? I hate internet. It sometimes just gives you useless information. DXGUID. I think that's to do with DXGI. This DXGI stuff is new and I've never used it before. Always just D3D and Win32, so I'll just find out what that is along the way. So that creates the swap chain. It's more about the link between the window, the H-Wind, and the window Win32 stuff and the D3D stuff. I guess like WGL context and stuff like that, how you link those up in OpenGL. And yeah, you used to have swap chain in D3D 10 and 9. I don't remember it being called DXGI. I'm not sure if D3D now has a debug and a release lib. I'll have to check that as well. Okay, so if I add those now, I've added the libs to the project, and I should be able to rebuild my solution. and see that premake's added them into the solution. So it succeeded, links was the correct terminology, and this has been changed, so I'm going to reload it. I'm going to then check properties, and my linker settings have only the ones I added, which is good. Like I said before, previously there was a load of junk in there. So now if I build and run this, there we go, D3D tutorial 1, D3D11 basics. I got an empty window and a D3D11 rendering context. Now this code I'm going to change a bit, and I'm going to have a main, and that'll have to be win main on Win32. The entry point, or win main, is going to be inside the engine. So I can come in, I can handle and abstract all the window stuff, and then in the game I will register a callback, or like hook in a callback, which when WinMain and D3D has initialized a game project will get its, that function entry point of the game essentially will be hooked in from there. So I'm not quite sure how to configure the projects to do that, so I'm going to have to figure that out.